Today, we're diving into the work of a thinker who truly revolutionized how we look at language, meaning, and, well, reality itself. His name was Ferdinand de Saussure, and honestly, his ideas are the key to unlocking so much of modern thought.
So let's start with a really basic question that's actually not basic at all. How do words really work? I mean, we use them all day, every day. We think they just point to things, right? The word cup points to a cup. Simple. But what if I told you it's way more complicated and honestly, way more fascinating than that?
All right, so here's our roadmap. We'll start by looking at the world before Saussure. Then we'll get into his big language revolution. After that, we'll explore how meaning is relational, see how this applies to the structure of stories, and finally, push these ideas to their pretty mind-bending conclusions.
Okay, so to really get just how big of a deal Saussure was, you have to understand what he was reacting against. What was the state of play? How did people think about literature and meaning before he came along?
Well, for a long time, one of the most popular approaches was something called new criticism. The whole idea was that a poem or a novel was like a perfectly sealed object. You didn't need to know about the author's biography or what was happening in history. Nope, all the meaning you could ever need was right there, in the words themselves, in the style, the rhythm, the paradoxes on the page.
And then along comes Ferdinand de Saussure. Now, he wasn't even a literary critic, he was a linguist, and he had this radical idea. He said, instead of tracing how words evolve through history, what if we just freeze language, look at it as a complete working system at a single moment in time? And that, right there, changed everything.
The absolute core of his theory is this thing he called the linguistic sign. Now hold on, because this is crucial. A sign is not a word pointing to a thing in the real world. For Saussure, a sign is a totally psychological thing. It's got two sides. It's the connection between a concept, an idea, and what he called a sound image. Not the actual physical sound, but the mental blueprint of that sound. So these two sides of the sign can't be separated. The first part is the signifier. That's the sound image. It's the word tree, as you say it in your head. The other part is the signified. That's the concept, your general idea of what a tree is, with a trunk and leaves and all that. The sign is the whole shebang, the two parts fused together in our minds.
And this is where Saussure drops his biggest bombshell. He claims that the connection between the signifier, the sound tree, and the signified, the concept of a tree, is totally, completely arbitrary. There's no natural reason, no logical link, no divine law that says that sound has to go with that idea. It's just a convention, a rule we've all agreed to follow without ever realizing it.
This is the perfect way to see it. If there was something naturally tree-like about the sound, then every language would use a similar word, right? But they don't. In English, it's tree. In Hindi, it's paired. The sounds have nothing in common, yet they point to the exact same concept. That's proof. The link isn't natural. It's just based on social agreement.
Okay, so if the link between a word and an idea is just random, that opens up a massive question. Where on earth does meaning come from then? And Saussure's answer is just brilliant. Meaning doesn't come from the words themselves, it comes from the differences between the words.
Think about it like this. We know what cat means, not because the sound has some secret cat essence. We know what cat means because it's not bat, it's not hat, and it's not mat. The meaning is created by its opposition to all the other words in the language system. It's defined by what it isn't.
Saussure had this amazing analogy of a train. So what makes the 825 train to Paris the 825 train? It's not the actual physical train cars. They could swap those out every single day. No, its identity comes purely from its place in the system, in the timetable. It is what it is because it comes after the 725 and before the 925. Its entire identity is relational.
So to help think about this language system, Saussure came up with another important distinction. He called the whole underlying structure, all the rules of the game, the grammar, the entire network of differences, the langue. And then any single thing you might say or write, any individual move in the game, he called parole. The people who followed him, the structuralists, they weren't interested in individual sentences. They wanted to map out the entire langue, the hidden system that makes speech possible.
And this is where Saussure's ideas just explode beyond linguistics. People started looking at his model and had this massive light bulb moment. They thought, wait a second, what if everything is a language? What if myths, family relationships, fashion, what if they all have their own hidden grammar, their own underlying structure?
And just like that, structuralism was born. It became this grand intellectual project to uncover the fundamental building blocks and the rules of combination for, well, all of human culture. The dream was to find the grammar of myths, the syntax of stories, and the deep structures that govern our social lives.
Take a classic fairy tale. You have these basic units, right? The princess, the evil stepmother, the handsome prince. And there are rules about how they interact. The princess is persecuted. The prince rescues her. Now, it doesn't matter if the story is Cinderella or Snow White. The surface details are different, but the deep structure, the underlying grammar, is exactly the same. That's the Langue of the fairy tale.
But the story doesn't end there. Saussure's revolution had an aftershock. A whole new generation of thinkers came along, the post-structuralists, and they took his ideas about language and pushed them to a really radical and kind of unsettling place.
So, thinkers like Jacques Derrida basically said, okay, let's follow this logic all the way. If a word only gets its meaning from its difference from other words, what happens when you try to pin a meaning down? Think about looking up a word in a dictionary. What do you find? Just more words. And if you look up those words, you find more words still. You are trapped in an endless chain of signifiers, never arriving at a final, concrete meaning. It's always just out of reach, always slipping away. This is what led Derrida to his most famous and most misunderstood statement. There is no outside text. Now, he didn't mean that the physical world isn't real or that only books exist. What he meant was that we have no way to access reality except through the structures of language, through these systems of signs. Our whole understanding of the world is shaped by and filtered through text in the broadest sense. There's no getting outside of that system to some pure, unmediated truth.
So, if you're going to take away 3 things from Saussure's massive contribution, let it be these. 1. The link between a word and an idea is arbitrary. 2. Meaning is created through difference, making it relational. And 3. All of this operates within a closed system.
And that leaves us with one last really big thought to chew on. If Saussure and everyone who followed him are right, if language doesn't just describe a pre-existing reality, but actually builds it for us, then what happens when we start to change the words we use? What kind of power are we actually wielding when we choose one word over another to define our world?